Do you know the origins of this hand gesture? Why does Leonard Cohen stick his hands out like that after praying? Before we get to that, let's examine the meaning of the word Cohen. Cohen is a Hebrew word that means priest. It is a title given to males who are believed to be the direct patrilineal descendant of Moses' brother Aaron, also known as Aaron. Aaron was the brother of Moses and the grandchild of Levi. Thus, they belong to the tribe of Levi, also known as Levites. Similarly to Cohens, Levites are males who claim patrilineal descent from the tribe of Levi, but not specifically descent of Aaron. In other words, Cohens are a specific branch of the tribe of Levi family tree. Some Levites have adopted a related last name to signify their status. Because of diverse geographical locations, the names have several variations. Here is a partial list of names taken from Wikipedia. As you can see, most of them sound something like Levi, Levin, Levine, but then some of them are a little bit different, like Epstein, and this comes from a German town name, historically one of the most prominent Levi lineages within Ashkenazi. Members of the tribe of Levi served particular religious duties as well as political and educational responsibilities. The Cohens, or the Kohanim, a subset of the Levites, were the priests, and they performed the priestly blessing. The Levites, referring to those who are not Cohens, who are not Kohanim, were assigned to other supporting roles such as singing or playing music, serving as guards, or carrying, amongst other things. There are certain restrictions that apply to Kohanim, such as they are not supposed to go near a graveyard, for example. The priestly blessing is usually delivered by a Cohen during prayer, and this is what we see Leonard Cohen doing in this video. The positioning of the Cohen's hands during the priestly blessing was Leonard Nimoy's inspiration for Dr. Spock's Vulcan salute in the original Star Trek. Just like Levites, Kohanim often bear surnames that reflect their genealogy, but many families with the surname Cohen are not Kohanim, and it's the same with Levites. Conversely, many Kohanim do not have Cohen as a surname, and it's the same with Levites. In modern-day Israel, a name like Moshe Cohen is the equivalent of John Smith in English. It's a very common name. Another famous Cohen is Sacha Baron Cohen, who is often seen as a conduit for racist propaganda. Another famous Cohen is Mickey Cohen, an American mobster who was based in Los Angeles, part of the Cohen crime family during the mid-20th century. Cohen happens to be the only prisoner who was ever bailed out of Alcatraz. He raised money for the Zionist American League for a Free Palestine. As a gangster, he was very impressed by the violence of Irgun, a Zionist paramilitary organization that operated in Mandatory Palestine between 1931 and 1948. He apparently taught Zionists how to use explosives. The Coen brothers famously produced a movie that shows how terrifying it would be to be an old man in a country shared by a vaguely Spanish person. There are also many famous Levites. As I have already mentioned, the name Epstein is a Levite name, and a cursory Googling will reveal that Jeffrey Epstein was a Levite. This behavior of buying and selling children is not surprising if you know Levitical law, or the history of the Levites. The Bible has a book called Leviticus, which is all about the Levites, and Leviticus 25 states that Israelites may buy children from foreigners residing amongst them as property that can be inherited by their own descendants. In other words, Jeffrey Epstein's behavior is completely permitted and in fact encouraged by Levitical law. Besides that, we have a famous South African example with Aubrey Levine, the psychologist who ran the concentration camp Greefswald, where he castrated and sexually molested young men. Aubrey Levine was the son of the first Jewish member of the South African Nationalist Party, otherwise known as the apartheid government, and his name was Mendel Levine, and he was the lawyer who tried to keep Nelson Mandela in prison, amongst many other things. And there's a great document called Meddling Mendel, which is highly recommended reading for anyone who wants a better insight into South African history and our relationship with Israel. I have personally met many Levites over the course of my life, and let me tell you, the quality of the names in this list does not get any better as it goes on, so I think the less said about it, the better.
It was going to be a slow process, but this program was like, I don't know, let's do it now. And that's why, within 2 weeks, I was channeling.
The only Cohen that I have encountered in my life is a lawyer who helped send me to prison and extort money from me under very suspicious and illegitimate circumstances. I started researching this topic because of some misinformation I stumbled across on YouTube, and instead of explaining it, I'll just let you see it for yourself.
CB01 is unique in that it is found in practically every Jewish community today. To date, the authors note that CB01 has been found among Ashkenazi, Moroccan, Algerian, Tunisian, Greek, Bulgarian, Turkish, Syrian, Iraqi, Iranian, Mountain, Afghan, and Yemenite Jews. There is no other comparable Jewish Y-DNA lineage that spans this many Jewish communities. Another interesting feature of CB01 is its diversity of non-Jewish testers today. CB01 has been found among non-Jewish individuals of Hispanic and Iberian, Southern Italian, Pontic Greek, Lebanese Christian, Palestinian Christian, Moroccan, Iraqi, Awazi, and Yemeni Arab origin among testers today. These testers are sometimes referred to informally as Jewish exits. While not Jewish today, they are ultimately of Jewish patrilineal descent. At some point in history, the connection to Judaism was lost, as was the connection to the priestly tradition.
When I started Googling the claims made in this video, I could find nothing, and he doesn't cite any of his sources. As far as I can gather, CB1 are either cannabinoid receptors that everybody has, or CB01 is a specific code for genes that help your body's natural killer cells identify and destroy infected cancerous cells, which is common in every single ethnic population around the world. Neither of these things has anything to do with the name Cohen, but there is a study on the patrilineal line of the Cohens, and that's probably what he's referring to. It's a 1997 study that examined the genetic characteristics of Cohenim and hypothesized the existence of a Cohen modal halotype, or CMH. Also known as the Y chromosomal aaron, this is a hypothesized most recent common ancestor of the patrilineal priestly chaste known as the Kohanim. While these genetic studies were seen to have possibly supported the traditional biblical narrative, subsequent research has challenged this conclusion in a number of ways and has shown, in fact, that the genealogical record refutes the idea of a single founder for Kohanim who lived in biblical times, and rather it seems to vindicate the historical critical hypothesis of competing priestly clans. In other words, there were multiple ancestors, not just one. The YouTuber who made these videos seems surprised that these characteristics were found in other groups around the world, but this seems extremely obvious to me. The characteristics of CMH are found in all communities around the world because it's just a genetic pattern that could develop in any human lineage. This bad hypothesis stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of genealogy. The Levite and Cohen line only take into account the patrilineal line and completely ignores the input of the mother. Most people have a surname, and it's most likely that that surname stems from your father's patrilineal line. And for some reason we see this as important, despite the fact that your genetic makeup is equally influenced by your mother as your father. Both of your grandmother's genetics, as well as your grandfather's genetics on your mother's side, are just as important as the genetics of your dad's dad. We only just went up 2 generations, and we already have 4 genetic lines to follow. And this number goes up exponentially by the power of 2. If you go back 9 generations, that is 512 genetic lines that make up your person. If we go back to Moses' generation, that is about 120 generations. The value of 2 raised to the power of 120 is this number, and that's how many genetic lines you now have to track. This number is greater than the human population of Earth at any given time in history. In reality, the number of genetic lines is much lower due to pedigree collapse. But even accounting for pedigree collapse, the patrilineal line remains a tiny fraction of your total ancestry, often less than 0.1% after just a few dozen generations. So while you may call yourself the same name as your father's 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 father, that one genetic line in that enormous crowd doesn't seem like it matters very much. The patrilineal line does track the origin of the Y chromosome, which is vitally important in triggering male development, but it has very little influence on day-to-day physical features like eye color, height, or facial structure. Out of the roughly 20,000 genes in the human genome, the Y chromosome holds fewer than 80 to 200 functional genes, representing less than 2% of your total DNA. Names often have meanings. As we have seen, Cohen means priest. My first name and surname, directly translated, means twin tower, as my first name, Thomas, comes from the Hebrew word meaning twin, a biblical name translated from the original Greek name Didymus, which also means twin. As you can see, the ancient Hebrews cared more about the meaning of the name of the disciple than they did about the phonetic pronunciation or the spelling. My last name means tower, if you consider that it may be derived from Torres or Torre, but it could also mean a pile of rocks in Britain, but twin pile of rocks doesn't sound as cool. Actually, my full name means Twin Fertile Valley Tower, but that's a story for another day. Sometimes surnames indicate a profession, such as the common English example Smith, which was some kind of a metal worker. As the legend in my family goes, a knight during the Crusades climbed a tower and cleared it by himself, and was thereby knighted Sir Torre. We have a family crest and everything. So one of my ancestors may have climbed a tower, a completely empty and uninhabited tower. Look, I understand what you may be thinking, but the idea of one of my ancestors unaliving a bunch of people in a religious war is not something that appeals to me. As a white South African, I am no stranger to the concept of generational guilt, and I think the way we have learned to cope with it is by saying, that wasn't me, I wasn't there, and to a large extent that is true. On the other hand, I may be the beneficiary of stolen property, and my continued inaction to remediate generational trauma may be a silent act of passive, persistent warfare. We could talk about that forever. What I know is I tend to think of myself as an individual, and any link to my patrilineal line was severed in 1993 when my father's life came to an abrupt finale at the end of an AK-47 when I was 2 years old. He spoke Zulu, as did his father, but I never got a chance to learn. Whatever culture my father preserved was lost, or at least diluted. I have researched my father's line, and there are some bad guys, and there are some guys that seem pretty chill. Henry Thomas Tor, for example, ran away from home and somehow learned to speak Xhosa. But his father was a British soldier who stole land for the British Empire. None of these people were kings or priests, so I don't know how much autonomy they had in the matter, but there is no doubt that my ancestors did some really bad things. Considering that by that point in my lineage I had 16 different genetic lines to follow, and near infinite other genetic lines since my species began, there is no doubt that a lot of unsavory interactions occurred. But I wasn't there. My consciousness, my personality, I started in 1991. I am not them, they are not me. I am not their comrade, I am not their friend, I am not their priest. In identifying with this obscure group of people that I've never met, I am relinquishing any autonomy I might have as an individual to shape my own opinions and have genuine emotional reactions to things. If someone insulted my ancestors or accused them of wrongdoing, it would be completely irrational to become upset or to react with defensive pride. It would also be completely ridiculous for me to claim any of their achievements as my own. I have a healthy shame for the behavior of my father's fathers and my mother's mothers, and I have an intention to create and preserve a better world, or at least not completely destroy the one we currently have. Free will may not exist, but it does seem like sometimes some people have more free will than others. And if, say, for some random example, your job is to prosecute people for objecting to an act of genocide because you identify with characters you read about in a book, then you really do not have any free will at all. And it's a little bit pathetic. I was able to recognize that these people who my sister hangs out with are not genuine people 10 years ago, long before I knew anything about Israel or the Levites. Because I am able to recognize this evil where others are not, it makes me seem bigoted, and I was accused of hating women, hating homosexuality, hating specific ethnicities, etc. I do not hate any person for no reason. But I do hate horrible people, and I hate religious bullshit and unearned authority, especially when that bullshit is directly linked with mass murder and mass human trafficking, the kidnapping and abuse of children. These evil people you choose to associate with have done their best to convince you that I am a bigot. They have torn you away from the most vulnerable members of your family, and they have completely ruined your life in ways that can never be remediated, and it makes me incredibly sad. The only thing you can do now to mitigate further damage is to completely cut contact with these people and reconnect with the people who actually care enough to tell you the truth. The truth may be sad, the truth might make you angry, but the truth will set you free.